that is happening. Because I think there was a time, and I now speak for myself, maybe I got it all wrong, there was a time when the robber baron or the person who did great business was assumed not to have good values. That good values and good business were thought to be antithetical to each other. But thank God in the last 20 years, and I don't know whether it has to do with Gen Y only, I don't think so. Now people are saying that you cannot do good business unless you also have good values. So now there are three things that need to be done, right? And I think that is the challenge, and that is what, of course you have to have sustained business outperformance. That's the beginning and that has to be the end. But at the same time you have to show extreme care for all stakeholders, whether it be customers, employees, shareholders, and also the communities. And you have to nurture and nourish the core values of the group. So performance, care, and values, all three have to be addressed if you want to have sustainable, good performing businesses. And this is the fundamental change that I see in the last 20 years. Because there was a time, maybe 20 or 25 years ago, when, as I said, you dare not speak of faffy things like feelings or values, or that's, you know, not for business, right? And so I'm very happy, and if the younger generation or of more women or greater diversity, whatever it is that is making it happen, I'm delighted that it is happening.
Rajiv, the last point which you mentioned, it's actually quite interesting, and it makes many of us to reflect. I'm afraid of saying research and data here on this stage, but there's one point which I would want to still mention, picking up from what Rajiv mentioned, that globally there's this trend which has been shown that Gen Y, when today, do not join you for the brand you are, but the values you are going to stand up for in the coming years. So they look at for a much bigger picture than probably what others were looking at. Prabir, what do you think? It really does it really matter to be having different kind of population, and does really HR need to reskill or upskill themselves to retain or engage them?
See, again, I guess, you know, we'll get into another cul-de-sac here because I hear almost all of us batting on the same pitch. Okay, let me put it this way. You know, for example, in my current role, I help different business leaders run very different businesses. Television is very different than oil. Oil is very different from life sciences. Life sciences is very different from retail. It's very different from telecom and whatever else. The kind of people who service these particular industries also are nuanced differently, because the consumer is different, the operating environment is different, the operating discipline could be different. Television cannot be run the way a big refinery is run. But one of the things that I think is very important when we talk about fine-tuning HR is, how do you nuance HR to pick the differences in the ask? I again would reiterate, to me it's not an issue of fundamentals wavering, but it's an issue of influence. How do you sell a value proposition? And it could be different because either the generations are different. In my hydrocarbons business, I have people who are 62, 65, they are in a very command and control environment. That's how they've worked. And maybe it's needed at some level. You can't play around with a refinery. When you talk to people who run, let's say, the television business, they are extremely different. You cannot go and say, this is my fatwa and thou shalt do it this way. It doesn't work. So I think the beauty is, how do you nuance HR? And as we speak, at least we are trying in Reliance, I'm trying to move HR people, because we have the opportunity today, between sectors. And I think it's playing out right. Because what is happening is there is always a cross-fertilization, a new learning. which comes just because you move sectors. And I must admit that it's not an easy battle to fight, because at least my current context has a lot more bias for domain. Whereas fundamentally, my personal view is good HR is good HR is good HR anywhere. And I think the challenge is, how do you therefore handhold, support? I must also share, I've created a group only focused on HR capability of 1,000 people. I can't be hiring 1,000 new people, right? So you've got to kind of help them, handhold them into maybe newer aspects of HR. Some of them are stuck in time. At the same time, how do you ensure that you also hone in greater depths on IR management, which is a skill which has died? And when we talk about HR or all the surveys that we look, we never ask questions on IR, but it's a very core discipline. If things are going right, what does IR do? And Ram, of course, has written very passionately about this, unfortunately, when we had some issues a couple of years back. But it is a fact. At the end of the day, you've got to get that going. You also, at the same time, you've been talking about talent analytics, and lest you go out feeling all the HR leaders have an issue with talent analytics. I have created a talent analytics group. We are trying to farm data, we are mining data. But the larger issue is, what do you do with that data? And how does the HR leader, and I must also put a caveat, you know, the conversation should again not mislead many of us that the only HR guy is the CHRO or the director HR. You know, HR also has different levels, and the ask will change from position to position, level to level. So when I hear Ram talk about perspective, completely endorse. The perspective of the HR head must be necessarily very different than a guy who's in the trenches. But it does not in any way alter the significance, importance, and criticality of that particular person. Because wars are not just won by generals, finally they are won by the troops in the trenches. And I think somewhere in this entire issue of chest beating, how relevant is HR? What has HR done? One of our larger issues is to get the troops to realize you make a difference. You have to get out of your little cocoon, which actually reinforces the same, you know, I'm a little doormat syndrome, and I've written about it earlier also. From the chairman to the doorman, everyone has a view on HR, but it doesn't make it right. So it is in that context of rotating people, exposing people, hand-holding people, standing by these people, getting the line manager to co-own the job of upskilling HR. It is not HR for HR alone. If the line manager is not willing to invest time and help the HR person, he will or she will get the HR that they deserve. So I think the equation is not as complex as we like it to be, but it is really about making the effort. Again, I think one of the panelists said, small things continue to chip away, the world will be a different place. And I think beyond that, one shouldn't, you know, that what have you, I have had in my own experience people almost asking me that, okay, if this guy sneezed yesterday, tell me what is the ROI of that sneeze. I don't care. I don't even want to attempt an answer. You know, and if that's the kind of state of the nation, then let them be with that reality. But I think, and Rajiv, you talked about that, I think there is definitely an evolution of leadership thinking. There is no doubt about it. People are, HR is also reflective of leadership. Rajiv has not been an HR person and is the president of our National HRD network, right? So you have a lot of people from business moving into HR, a lot of people from HR moving into business. And I think in that cross-fertilization, I will still retain my thesis. Please do not confuse the agenda of HR with HR, the function. And that short-sightedness, that myopia, and our acceptance of that is actually creating far bigger issues than actually what the issues are.
Right. Prabir, I think the last point which you made, HR and business, I can conclude by saying that HR and business are coming much closer. It were, for some organizations, they were quite close, but for many now, the line is getting thinner and thinner. Yes, yes. One of the points which you made, Prabir, I'm going to pull that as a question for Yogi. That's the value proposition. Now, we heard you say that the value proposition could be probably different and it needs to be engaging. And Yogi, you talked about both baby boomers and Gen Y. Do you really think that that's what one should be doing from an HR perspective? Secondly, how actually are you managing these two very different age groups? Their thinking, here you say, are connected, but in a practicality, how is it working for you?
I first of all have some things to say about some of the comments which my colleagues made, and I just want to build on those points. I thought that the research which you talked about was only a talking point. So I'm neither going to applaud the research, neither am I going to flog it. It's basically something that we wanted to generate a conversation around. Now, second point is, when we talk about have the fundamentals changed in terms of skilling, for me, and I want to wordsmith a bit, skill which is practiced, lived, becomes a competency. And if it is done over and over again, it is respected as a competency. For me, there has been a huge change in the skill requirement of HR folks. When I started my career, we were taught about Factories Act 1948 and the statutory responsibility of a welfare officer. And then, of course, we were taught about personal management, which I respect a lot, about how many calories are required for a worker and so on, which is very, very important. Today, there are articles comparing a CHRO and a CEO, and they're doing the rounds quite a bit. So all I'm saying is, we've come a long way. When I did my economics honors, and Rajiv with Kingsley Davis and Malthus, we didn't hear about demographic dividend, did we? So we didn't even think about these things those days. And our performance appraisal systems, many of them in the past, which were around what B.F. Skinner wrote about the confused rat, when the poor thing couldn't find the cheese, is now very, very different. You don't have those kind of theories anymore. So has the basic skill requirement changed? I'm holding a mic here which says Birla Institute of Technology, BIMTech, which is all about imparting education to young, and there may be many other educational institutions like this. So at one level, I think the kind of skill inputs or competency inputs has to be different as compared to earlier. Second is, do we need to upgrade our skills and competencies? I'm using them interchangeably. As we go along the HR journey, definitely yes. Third is, to pick on what Prabir said, HR does not belong to only HR professionals, it belongs to those who are running line, and they too have to upgrade their skills, but who can be the best champion in this? Someone has to be, so therefore I think the CHRO should be. Now you talked about what do you think about the Gen Y, and how do you think we should? I feel that the insights into what makes Gen Y tick today is extremely important and different from what it was earlier. Today, in an IT company, an ITES company, 70% of your personal cost is because of billable recruitment. Okay? When I grew up in my younger days, manufacturing sector used to talk about personal costs of 7 to 8 to 9%, if you're more generous, 14%. Today, therefore, that word talent is extremely important. If you don't have leadership talent, you might want to close a business. If you have it, you might want to start a business. You might want to continue with the business. If you have the right talent, you may want to really relook at the business if you don't have the right talent. And in that talent, I think the younger generation is absolutely critical. The learnability especially since you started off your opening comments about the Indian context, the learnability of the young Indians is very, very humbling. I think the potential that they have to change this world. The other day I heard about a young man of 24 who had written an app and sold it to Google, I think for some 35 lakhs or something. And it's on a scientific calculator. And it's had a huge number of downloads from Play Store. So, I mean, that is the kind of hidden stuff we have in our younger population. I feel very passionate that HR folks and the line managers have a great role in creating an innovative culture, in abolishing to a large extent command and control, in creating the right kind of environment for people to grow. And lastly, I think the employee relations piece that we dealt with Section 9A and notices of change and so on, has changed absolutely dramatically now. I think the employee relations that we're talking about is not anymore we, they. It's more about respect. It's more about understanding where the younger people come from, where they want to go. It's more about reading aspirations and bowing down to them and doing something concrete rather than doing a win-lose domestic inquiry and trying to figure out, whether you're technically right or wrong.
Thanks, Yogi. I think what we're hearing you say is that we've come a long way. You talked about the comparison which the research is making between CHRO and CEOs. You also talked about the younger generation are different and therefore things need to be looked at differently. I think I'll be a little less selfish and have the audience have some comments or questions coming from you all. I see a few really eager people wanting to ask questions. So why don't we have the mic arranged for them? Yeah, you got the mic. Okay.
In executive search and now building a kind of a cloud platform for talent acquisition with the passion of ideate, innovate and implement. And this is a preface I said because my question is regarding talent acquisition. I did hear that HR was a person in good old days time who used to be blind supporter of capitalist. Now, as Ram and everybody has put it, that it has become a proactive and just arbitrator of the speechless and the people below, and anybody who does this thing is a HR person. This is what I understand from this. The role has now come to this thing. It need not to be HR head to be HR, it can be CEO, it can be CFO. My question today is, in talent acquisition, what redefinition we need to do? When I say talent acquisition, I don't mean only sourcing. Let's start post-sourcing. Sourcing can be taken care of by whatever means. So I like to ask this question, what is the redefinition? How do you want to redefine the talent acquisition function, which